What if everything you thought you knew about ancient rituals was only half the story? Picture this. You're standing in a dimly lit museum, gazing at an object that seems purely ceremonial, intricately carved, maybe even a little mysterious. For centuries, experts told us such items were symbolic, meant only for prayer or offering. But what if I told you that many of these so-called ritual objects were, in fact, precision instruments, sophisticated tools designed not just for ceremony, but for science? This is where our journey begins, at the thrilling intersection of ancient spirituality and astonishing ingenuity. Today, we're uncovering 26 forgotten ritual tools that turn out to be something far more extraordinary. These aren't just artifacts, they're keys to understanding how our ancestors blended the sacred with the scientific in ways we're only now beginning to appreciate. From Egyptian star clocks disguised as funerary items to Roman surveying tools carried like religious staffs, these objects challenge everything we assumed about the past. They reveal that ancient priests, builders, and thinkers were often masters of astronomy, engineering, and mathematics, hiding their innovations within objects of reverence and ritual. By the time we're done, you won't just see these tools differently, you'll see history itself through an entirely new lens. You'll discover how spiritual practices and technological advancement weren't separate paths, but deeply intertwined forces driving human progress. So come with us as we unravel these mysteries, one fascinating discovery at a time. Get ready to have your view of the past forever transformed. To truly appreciate these remarkable instruments, we need to step into a world vastly different from our own, a world where the lines between the laboratory and the temple simply did not exist. For ancient civilizations, the universe was a single, interconnected whole. The movements of the stars were not just physical phenomena, they were the actions of gods. Predicting the Nile's flood was both an agricultural necessity and a divine ritual. In this holistic worldview, every practical tool could carry spiritual weight, and every sacred object could hold a practical function. This wasn't a secret or a deception. It was the natural order of things. Priests and scholars were often one and the same, tasked with understanding the cosmos in all its aspects, both its measurable rhythms and its mystical meanings. Their places of worship were designed as cosmic engines. Egyptian temples, for instance, were meticulously aligned with specific stars. A narrow corridor might only allow the light of Sirius, the star associated with the goddess Isis, to penetrate the inner sanctum on one precise night of the year, marking a festival. This wasn't just architecture, it was a form of celestial timekeeping built into the very stones of their faith. The Maya constructed pyramids that cast shadows in the shape of a serpent slithering down the steps during the equinoxes, a breathtaking merger of astronomical observation and mythological storytelling. Greek thinkers like Aristotle wrote extensively on biology and physics, but their work was deeply interwoven with philosophical inquiries about the soul and the prime mover. Roman engineers, while building aqueducts and roads with the Groma, saw their work as bringing divine order to the chaotic wilderness. This integration served a crucial purpose: the preservation of knowledge. In eras of upheaval, libraries could burn and empires could fall, but ritual is resilient. By embedding precise astronomical data into a ceremonial calendar or encoding geometric principles into the construction of a sacred space, this vital information was protected. It became part of the culture's immutable tradition, passed down through generations under the guise of religious observance. The tools themselves, often crafted from precious materials and treated with reverence, were more likely to be preserved in tombs or treasuries than a simple wooden measuring stick would have been. So when we look at these objects now and see only ritual, we're missing half of their story. We're seeing the container, but not the precious contents it was designed to safeguard. They represent a complete philosophy, one that saw no conflict between seeking answers through careful measurement and seeking truth through spiritual devotion. So how do we peel back the layers of time and misinterpretation to reveal the true purpose of these objects? It's a fascinating process of scientific detective work that goes far beyond simply looking at an artifact in a museum case. Modern researchers approach these mysteries with a multidisciplinary toolkit, blending the careful observation of archaeology with the precise measurement of materials science and the hands-on testing of experimental reconstruction. It often starts with advanced imaging techniques. High-resolution 3D scanning can create a perfect digital model of an object, allowing scientists to examine every microscopic groove and wear pattern from every angle without ever touching the original. They might use X-ray fluorescence to determine the exact elemental composition of the metal, revealing if it was a common alloy used for ceremonial items or a more specialized, harder material chosen to withstand repeated practical use. Sometimes the most telling clues are the smallest. A residue of a specific pigment trapped in a tiny crack might suggest the tool was used for marking or scribing, not just held aloft in a procession. Or a pattern of microscopic scratches on a stone blade could indicate it was used to cut a particular type of material repeatedly, pointing towards a craft application rather than a single ritual sacrifice. But technology alone doesn't solve the puzzle. This is where the deep knowledge of historians comes in, poring over ancient texts and records in search of descriptions that might have been misunderstood for generations. A phrase once translated as "the priest brandished the sacred symbol" might be re-examined and understood as "the surveyor aligned the guiding instrument." Comparative studies are equally crucial. An object found in an Egyptian tomb might seem utterly unique until a similar item is discovered in a Mesopotamian workshop, its purpose well documented, providing a vital clue to its Egyptian counterpart's function. The final and perhaps most revealing step is experimental archaeology. Experts create meticulous replicas of these tools using period-appropriate materials and techniques, and then they actually try to use them. They might attempt to survey a field with a replica Groma or track a star's path with a rebuilt merkhet. It's in this hands-on process that the truth often emerges. A slight imbalance makes the object useless for precise work, or conversely, a cleverly hidden feature makes it perfectly suited for a task no one had ever considered. This entire process transforms these artifacts from static symbols into dynamic pieces of technology. We begin to see the shine of wear on a handle where a user's grip would naturally fall, or the subtle polish on a gear tooth from years of careful operation. What was once dismissed as decorative etching is recognized as a calibrated scale, and a shape deemed purely artistic is understood as an aerodynamic or ergonomic necessity. It's a continuous process of re-evaluation, where each new technological advancement gives us a sharper lens through which to view the ingenious minds of the past. Our first example takes us to the banks of the Nile, where we find the merkhet. For a long time, this object was catalogued in museums as a ceremonial item, a simple bar of wood or metal often discovered in the company of burial goods. Its common depiction in hieroglyphs alongside priests and gods seemed to confirm its role, a symbolic instrument to guide the departed soul through the dark of the underworld, much like a spiritual compass. But this interpretation was only seeing the surface. The true genius of the merkhet is revealed when we understand how it was actually used. The device itself is elegantly simple in its construction. It consists of a central horizontal bar, often notched or marked, from which a weighted plumb line was suspended. A priest astronomer, known as an hour watcher, would use a pair of these instruments. They would set them up a short distance apart, carefully aligning them with the North Star, which the Egyptians knew as the unwearying star for its fixed position in the heavens. Once aligned, the observer would sight along the two strings, creating a precise meridian line, a true north-south axis. Then the real work began. They would wait for other, imperishable stars to cross this invisible line in the sky. Each star's transit marked the passage of a specific hour of the night. By counting these transits, the Egyptians could divide the darkness into 12 equal parts, regardless of the season. This was no rough estimate. It was a highly accurate method of timekeeping. The practical applications were immense. This precise timing governed the complex scheduling of nightly religious rituals, ensuring offerings were made at the correct moment to maintain cosmic order, or mat. It also regulated the gods' watches and informed the logistics of state. But the merkhet's utility didn't end with the stars. During the day, a simpler version of the same principle could be used with the sun. By tracking the moving shadow cast by the plumb line's weight across the marked bar, they could also tell time, making it a truly 24-hour tool. This transforms our view of the merkhet from a passive symbol into an active, precision scientific instrument. It was the ancient equivalent of an observatory's telescopic mount and a highly accurate clock, all built into a portable, robust device. The priest operating it wasn't just performing a rite, he was a scientist collecting empirical data, a timekeeper for the kingdom, and a spiritual guide all at once. The merkhet perfectly embodies that seamless blend of the sacred and the scientific, proving that for the Egyptians, understanding the mechanics of the universe was the highest form of worship. Now, let's travel from the banks of the Nile to the heart of the Roman Empire, where we encounter another object of dual purpose, the Groma. If you were a citizen in ancient Rome, you might have seen a priest carrying what appeared to be a ceremonial staff during a religious procession. It was an ornate, cross-shaped object, often held high, and it would have been easy to assume it was purely a symbol of divine authority or a connection to the gods. This was the public face of the Groma, a clever disguise that hid its true, groundbreaking function. In reality, this was not a staff for ceremony, but one of the most important precision engineering tools in history, a device so critical it literally shaped the Roman world. The genius of the Groma lies in its deceptively simple design. At its core was a horizontal cross made of wood or metal, with each of its 4 arms pointing in a cardinal direction. From the end of each arm, a plumb line was suspended, a simple weight on a string. The surveyor, known as an agrimensor, would plant the central staff firmly into the ground. By sighting along the pairs of opposing plumb lines, he could establish a perfectly straight line in one direction, and then, by turning the cross 90 degrees, a perfectly straight line in the other. The intersecting lines created by these sites formed a precise right angle, the fundamental building block of Roman planning. This ability to map out perfect 90-degree angles and dead straight lines was nothing short of revolutionary. It was the Roman equivalent of a modern theodolite or GPS unit. With the Groma, teams of surveyors could lay out the entire grid of a new city, the Cardo and Decumanus streets crossing at the central forum with astonishing accuracy, even over vast distances. They plotted the relentless, arrow-straight courses of Roman roads, which conquered geography by ignoring it, tunneling through hills and bridging valleys. Most impressively, they laid out the precise, rectangular boundaries of military camps or castra, each night on the march, providing a standardized, defensible, and orderly fortress no matter where the legion found itself in the known world. But why the disguise? Why carry this sophisticated instrument as if it were a religious icon? The answer is a fascinating insight into Roman culture. The work of the surveyor was not just about engineering. It was about imposing ordered cosmos onto what the Romans saw as chaos. This act of demarcation, of creating boundaries and right angles, was deeply symbolic. It was a divine rite, a ritual of civilization. By having the Groma carried by figures with religious authority, the Romans were sanctifying the very process of building their empire. It blended practical necessity with cultural and spiritual justification. The surveyor wasn't just a technician, he was a priest of order, using his sacred tool to bring the will of Rome and the gods to the farthest frontiers. This seamless integration allowed for ambitious projects to proceed under an umbrella of cultural acceptance, ensuring that the mathematical precision required to build an aqueduct or a fortress was seen not as a cold scientific act, but as a harmonious part of the natural and divine order. The Groma, therefore, stands as a powerful symbol of Roman ingenuity. It was a tool that built an empire, yet was wise enough to wear the cloak of ritual, proving that even the most practical minds in history understood the power of symbolism in achieving their monumental goals. From the orderly grids of Rome, we journey now into the lush rainforests of the Maya, where we encounter objects that defy simple explanation, the eccentric flints. These are some of the most visually striking artifacts ever produced in the ancient world. Craftsmen spent countless hours using rudimentary tools to chip away at blocks of chert or obsidian, not to create a sharp blade or a practical tool, but to form breathtakingly intricate shapes. We see sinuous serpents, elaborate god profiles, complex geometric patterns, and abstract forms that seem to swirl with a life of their own. For generations, archaeologists interpreted these incredible objects through a single lens, ritual. They were found cached as offerings, carefully placed in the foundations of temples or laid to rest in the tombs of kings. Their sheer fragility and obvious impracticality for any daily task made the ceremonial conclusion seem inescapable. They were seen as gifts to the gods, symbolic representations of mythic creatures, or perhaps powerful charms, their very complexity intended to display the wealth and devotion of the ruler who commissioned them. They were, in a word, art, but what if this art was also a sophisticated form of science? A growing body of research is now proposing a radical reinterpretation. Could these eccentric flints be among the world's most beautiful and portable astronomical calculators? The Maya were arguably the greatest astronomers of the ancient Americas, with a calendrical system of such complexity and accuracy it rivals our own. They meticulously tracked the cycles of the sun, the moon, and particularly the planet Venus, which they associated with their god Kukulkan. The synodic period of Venus, the time it takes for the planet to return to the same point in the sky relative to the sun, is 584 days. This number was sacred, and its prediction was crucial for scheduling both warfare and ceremonies. Now look again at an eccentric flint, those seemingly random notches, those precise angles and carefully counted spines. Researchers are finding that they often correspond exactly to these critical astronomical numbers. The key to their function may have been interaction with another element, light. Imagine a priest astronomer holding one of these flints up during a specific time of day. As sunlight streams through the complex negative spaces between the carved forms, it could cast a very specific pattern of shadows onto a flat surface, a pattern that changes with the angle of the sun. On a day of an equinox, the shadows might align perfectly to form a straight line, or the notches could be used to count off the days between celestial events, acting as a physical, tactile calendar. When used in conjunction with other architectural features, Like the stairways of pyramids, which were themselves giant calendars, these flints could have served as a portable key to decode the heavens. They might have been used to predict the arrival of the rainy season for farmers, or to forewarn of an eclipse, a terrifying event seen as a bite being taken out of the sun. This transforms our understanding of their purpose entirely. They were not merely offerings to ask for divine favor. They were tools used to demonstrate a priest's ability to commune with and predict the actions of the gods themselves. The knowledge of the cosmos encoded in stone was the ultimate source of power for Maya rulers. By burying these objects, they weren't just giving a gift, they were sealing that knowledge within the very fabric of their sacred structures, a permanent testament to their wisdom and their direct line to the celestial order. The eccentric flint is no longer just a ritual object. It becomes a crystallized equation, a snapshot of the Maya universe, proving that their greatest art was not just for show, it was a profound and precise language for speaking with the stars. Leaving behind the intricate stonework of the Maya, we venture into the philosophical heart of the ancient world, Greece. Here, within the hallowed sanctuaries of gods like Zeus and Apollo, archaeologists uncovered fragments of heavily corroded bronze, often found alongside offerings and oracular paraphernalia. These puzzling assemblages of gears, dials, and inscribed rings were initially catalogued as ritual objects, perhaps elaborate, symbolic representations of the cosmos used to please the deities or seek their favor during ceremonies. Their connection to the divine seemed obvious, and for a long time that was where the story ended. But what if these objects, which we now call Astraria, were not just symbolic props but the most sophisticated computers of the ancient world? The turning point in our understanding came with painstaking modern reconstructions. By carefully studying the gear ratios and tooth counts on the surviving fragments, researchers like Derek de Solla Price began to piece together their true function. They discovered that these devices were, in fact, incredibly intricate orreries, mechanical models of the solar system. Through a complex arrangement of interlocking bronze gears, an Astrarium could simulate the motions of the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets with a degree of accuracy that is simply staggering. Turning a handle on the side would set the entire model in motion, with each celestial body moving at its own, correct pace across a dial representing the zodiac. This wasn't just a pretty display, it was a predictive engine. Priests could use it to forecast lunar phases, solar eclipses, and the retrograde motion of planets, events that were of paramount importance for scheduling religious festivals, agricultural activities, and even the all-important Olympic Games. Imagine the scene within a temple. A priest, perhaps before a crowd of initiates, would operate this gleaming bronze device. As he turned the handle, he wouldn't just be demonstrating a mechanical trick. He would be revealing the very mechanics of the universe itself, showing the harmonious, predictable dance of the celestial spheres as conceived by philosophers like Aristotle and Ptolemy. This provided a powerful, tangible reinforcement of Greek spiritual beliefs. It visually proved the concept of a cosmos governed by divine, mathematical order, a cosmos where the god's will was expressed through perfect, predictable motion. Yet, behind this public demonstration of faith lay a deeply practical and secretive purpose. These Astraria were also precision instruments for training and calculation. For an aspiring astronomer or a philosopher, the device served as an analog computer, allowing them to work out complex celestial problems without tedious manual calculation. It was a hands-on educational tool that bridged the gap between abstract theory and observable reality. The fusion of myth and mechanics in the Astrarium is perhaps one of the most elegant examples of this entire phenomenon. It used the very latest in metallurgical and engineering skill, gears cut with precision that would not be rivaled for over 1,000 years, to serve a higher purpose, to make the will of the gods visually comprehensible, and to equip the intellectual elite with the tools to understand their place in a beautifully ordered universe. Venturing now from the Mediterranean sun into the misty, churning waters of the North Atlantic, we encounter one of history's most enduring and poetic examples of this duality, the Norse Sunstone. The Viking sagas, those epic tales of exploration and conquest, speak of a mysterious solstine, a sunstone. In the texts, it sounds like pure magic, when the skies were shrouded in impenetrable cloud or fog, rendering the sun invisible. A skilled navigator could use this stone to divine the sun's location. It was described in almost ritualistic terms, a talisman that could seemingly summon the sun's guidance from behind the veil of weather. For centuries, historians dismissed this as myth, a charming piece of folklore born from the superstitious minds of sailors facing the terrifying vastness of the ocean. How could a stone possibly see the sun on a cloudy day? It seemed like a fantastical metaphor for hope or divine favor, not a literal tool. That is, until science caught up with the saga. The breakthrough came from a combination of archaeology and optical physics. Among the wreckage of a 16th century English warship, itself a descendant of the Viking sailing tradition, researchers found a clear, rhomboid crystal of Icelandic spar, a form of calcite. This was no ordinary piece of cargo. Its location near the ship's navigation instruments was the first clue. Then, laboratory analysis revealed its incredible property. It is a natural polarizing filter. To understand how this works, we must picture sunlight itself. Even when the sun is hidden by clouds, its light still penetrates the atmosphere. This light scatters in all directions, but it creates a pattern of polarization, a specific direction of vibration in the light waves that forms a ring around the sun, invisible to the naked human eye. The Icelandic spar crystal makes this pattern visible. A navigator would hold the crystal up to the sky and slowly rotate it. When looking through the calcite, due to its unique property of double refraction, they would see two images. As they rotated the stone, these two images would change in brightness. The precise point where the two images matched exactly in intensity revealed the axis of polarization, pointing directly to the hidden sun's position. It was a genius method of celestial navigation that did not require a clear sky, only a patch of blue. This transforms our understanding of Viking voyages. Their legendary journeys to Iceland, Greenland, and even North America were not just feats of brutal endurance and luck. They were triumphs of sophisticated technology. While they certainly used shorelines, bird flights, and wave patterns, the Sunstone provided a reliable, scientific backup when those methods failed in the open ocean. It was the key that unlocked safe passage across hundreds of miles of featureless sea. But the most fascinating layer is how this tool was culturally understood. The Vikings did not separate the practical from the spiritual. To them, the sun was not just a celestial body, it was the chariot of the goddess Sol, chased across the sky by the wolf Skirl. Finding the sun was not just a calculation, it was an act of aligning oneself with the divine order, of seeking the favor of the gods for a safe journey. The navigator using the sunstone was therefore both a scientist and a mystic. He was performing a ritual that felt magical, yet was grounded in precise physical principles. The myth of the sunstone was the narrative container that preserved this vital, life-saving knowledge for generations. It was too important to be forgotten, so it was woven into the very fabric of their cultural identity, told and retold in sagas around the fire. The sunstone stands as a perfect symbol of the Norse spirit, fiercely practical, deeply connected to their environment, and always seeing the hand of the divine in the mechanics of the world. It was a tool that turned the sky into a compass and a sailor into a seer, proving that even the most legendary myths often have a kernel of brilliant, undeniable truth. Moving from the open seas of the Norse world, we find ourselves in ancient China, contemplating an object of serene beauty and profound mystery, the jade by disc. For centuries, these flawless circles of polished stone, often discovered in the tombs of nobles and kings, were interpreted through a purely spiritual lens. Their smooth, unbroken shape was seen as a symbol of heaven itself, a celestial gateway meant to ensure the deceased's smooth passage into the afterlife. Their presence among grave goods was a statement of belief, a beautiful and solemn ritual object. But what if that perfect circle held a more tangible, earthly purpose as well? A closer inspection of certain by discs reveals details that challenge this purely symbolic interpretation. While many are unadorned, others bear faint but deliberate incisions, precise radial lines dividing the disc into even segments, or concentric circles etched with remarkable consistency. The thickness of these discs is also telling. Some exhibit a uniformity that suggests a standard unit of measurement, rather than an artist's freehand work. This level of geometric precision hints at a potential function far beyond the tomb. One compelling theory proposes that these marked by discs served as astronomical protractors or templates. A priest astronomer, perhaps of the Zhou or Han dynasty, could have used such a disc in conjunction with a simple gnomon, an upright stick. By placing the disc flat on the ground and observing how the shadow of the gnomon fell across its etched lines throughout the year, they could track the changing altitude of the sun. The specific points where the solstice shadows touched the disc's markings would provide a reproducible annual calendar, crucial for scheduling the planting and harvesting of crops upon which the entire kingdom depended. The circular form itself is a masterclass in cosmological thinking. The central hole, often explained symbolically as representing the axis mundi, or the connection between heaven and earth, could have had a practical application as well. By sighting a pole star through this hole, an observer could establish a true fixed point in the night sky, around which the other stars appeared to rotate. This simple act transformed the bai from a passive symbol into an active observational tool, a stone window framing the orderly motion of the heavens. This duality is a perfect expression of ancient Chinese philosophy, particularly the concept of the mandate of heaven. The emperor's right to rule was believed to be granted by the heavens themselves, but it was maintained through practical, earthly virtue and effective governance, which included ensuring a well-fed populace through accurate calendars. The bai disc embodies this principle perfectly. It was an object that allowed the ruling class to demonstrate their understanding of Tian, the heavens, not through abstract prayer alone, but through the tangible, predictable science of the seasons. By burying a bai disc with a ruler, they weren't just sending a symbol to the afterlife, they were interring a testament to that ruler's earthly ability to harmonize human activity with the celestial order. It was both a spiritual passport and a resume of effective scientific kingship. The jade bai, therefore, transcends its role as mere ornament or offering. It becomes a physical manifesto of a world where understanding the universe through measurement and observation was the highest form of reverence, proving that for the ancient Chinese, the path to heaven was charted with precision. Now, let's shift our perspective dramatically from the cosmic calculations of the Maya and Greeks to a tool that forces us to confront one of the most misunderstood aspects of ancient life, the Aztec tekpatl. When we picture an Aztec sacrificial knife, the image is almost universally one of sheer, unadulterated brutality, a fearsome blade of obsidian, slick with blood, wielded by a priest in a terrifying public ritual. This object has become a symbol of a culture often reduced in popular imagination to its most violent and alien practices. But what if this narrow view is blinding us to a far more complex and sophisticated truth? Recent discoveries are forcing a complete reassessment of this infamous instrument, revealing a duality that is as shocking as it is enlightening. Under the unforgiving lens of a scanning electron microscope, the story of the Tecpatl changes entirely. We are no longer looking at a crude weapon, but at a masterpiece of lithic technology. Obsidian, a volcanic glass, can be knapped to an edge that is literally molecules thick, far sharper than even the finest modern surgical steel. Analysis of blades from archaeological sites shows that some Tecpatl were crafted with this incredible sharpness, honed to a razor's edge that could make incisions with minimal tissue damage and trauma. Furthermore, the balance and ergonomics of the handles were meticulously designed, allowing for controlled, precise movements rather than wild, hacking blows. The wear patterns on these blades tell a new story. Alongside evidence of the well-documented ritual uses, some knives show microscopic striations and polish consistent with making very fine, careful cuts on hard surfaces like bone or on softer organic materials. This is the key that unlocks a hidden world of Aztec science. The Aztecs possessed an incredibly advanced understanding of human anatomy, gained not only from battle but from ritual autopsies and a vast botanical and medical tradition. Their priests, the Tictil, were not just religious figures, they were also doctors, healers, and surgeons. They performed complex procedures, from setting broken bones with splints to suturing wounds with human hair, and even trepanation, the delicate practice of drilling or cutting a hole in the skull to relieve pressure or treat mental illness. For a procedure as precise as trepanation, a tool of unparalleled sharpness and control was an absolute necessity. A slip could be fatal. The Tecpatl in the right hands was that tool. This transforms the Tecpatl from a one-dimensional symbol of death into a multifaceted instrument of both life and death, of spiritual duty and medical necessity. The same blade that performed a bloodletting ceremony to honor the gods and ensure the sun would rise could, in a different context, be sterilized in the flame of a torch and used to carefully lance an abscess, perform a ritual tattoo with symbolic meaning, or even assist in a difficult birth. This was not a contradiction in the Aztec worldview, it was a harmony. Life required death, and healing was deeply interconnected with spiritual belief. Blood was not just something to be spilled, it was a sacred life force, Chalchihuath, and its controlled release, whether for the gods or for medical purposes, was an act of profound significance. This revelation does not erase the reality of Aztec sacrifice, but it adds crucial depth and nuance, shattering a long-held stereotype. It reveals a culture that approached the intricacies of the human body with the same skill and reverence they applied to the spiritual cosmos. The Tecpatl, therefore, stands as a powerful testament to Aztec ingenuity, a tool that embodies their complex, integrated understanding of the world, where the line between the surgeon's scalpel and the priest's sacred blade was not a line at all. Journeying from the precise medical blades of the Aztecs, we arrive in the dusty, sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia, the very cradle of civilization, where we find an object that perfectly encapsulates the union of heaven and earth. Within the sacred precincts of a ziggurat, archaeologists often uncovered beautifully carved stone objects, some shaped like dates or pomegranates, crafted from polished basalt or limestone, and sometimes even inscribed with dedicatory prayers to the gods. For a long time, their interpretation seemed straightforward. These were ritual weights, symbolic offerings meant to represent a devotee's contribution to the temple, or perhaps sacred tokens representing the divine order and stability bestowed by the gods. They were items of faith, not function. But as with so many of these tools, a second, much closer look revealed a truth that was both more practical and far more profound. When examined not as isolated artifacts but as part of an architect's toolkit, their purpose becomes stunningly clear. These ornate stones are, in fact, precision plumbobs. The key evidence lies in their wear and their form. Many show a slight, polished groove around their top, a telltale sign where a cord was tied and wore away at the stone over years of use. Their weight is meticulously consistent within sets, and their shapes are perfectly symmetrical, ensuring they would hang straight and true without any sway that could throw off a measurement. This was not a suggestion of verticality, it was a guarantee of it. Now picture the scene at the base of a colossal ziggurat, a massive stepped pyramid reaching for the heavens. For the master builders of Mesopotamia, ensuring that such a monumental structure was perfectly vertical was not merely an engineering concern, it was a theological imperative. A ziggurat was a zigguratu, a word that literally means to build on a raised area. It was believed to be a literal bridge between the world of humans and the realm of the gods. If this bridge were to lean, to slump, or to be askew, it would be a catastrophic failure on both a physical and a spiritual level. It would suggest imperfection in the connection to the divine. This is where the plumbob came in. An architect or chief mason would have used this tool constantly throughout construction. He would tie his cord to that worn groove and dangle the weight against the rising mud brick walls. The unwavering vertical line it provided was the standard against which every single course of bricks was measured. The same exquisitely carved stone that was perhaps blessed in a ceremony and dedicated to a god like Enki or Inanna was then put to work every day, coated in the dust of the build, ensuring that the earthly manifestation of the celestial gateway was flawless. This duality is a breathtaking expression of the Mesopotamian worldview. They saw no conflict between the spiritual and the physical because they believed the physical world was a reflection of a divine, orderly plan. The precision of their construction was a form of worship. By using a sacred object to achieve a perfect right angle, they were literally building their piety into the very fabric of their society. The plumbob was the instrument that made this philosophy tangible. It was a tool that translated a prayer for stability into the reality of a wall that would not collapse. It ensured that the ziggurat would not only stand for centuries as a testament to their engineering skill, but would also perfectly fulfill its sacred duty as a straight and true pathway for communication with the gods. In the Mesopotamian mind, the greatest honor they could pay to their deities was to create a perfect, ordered world in their image, and this humble, beautiful weight was one of the most important tools they used to achieve that harmony. Imagine a great bronze cauldron excavated from a Celtic chieftain's burial mound, its surface gleaming with elaborate swirls and enigmatic figures. For generations, these magnificent vessels were seen as the ultimate symbols of ritual and community, central to great feasts, used for ceremonial offerings to the gods, and often interred as grave goods to signify status and belief. The intricate artwork that covers them was interpreted as scenes from mythology, a visual tapestry of gods, heroes, and cosmic battles. It was a beautiful and seemingly complete interpretation. But what if the true purpose of these cauldrons was far more ingenious, and the art we admired was actually a complex and precise code? A growing number of archaeologists and historians are now proposing a radical idea: that some of these prized cauldrons were, in fact, sophisticated lunisolar calendars, functioning as the astronomical computers of their day. The key to this theory lies in a meticulous re-examination of those intricate engravings. Instead of viewing them as free-form artistic expressions, researchers have begun to map the patterns, counting lines, noting the clustering of dots, and measuring the spacing between symbols. They've discovered that these designs are anything but random. Specific sequences of markings appear to correspond perfectly to the 19-year Metonic cycle, the period it takes for the phases of the moon to recur on the same days of the solar year. This cycle was the holy grail of ancient timekeeping, as it allowed for the reconciliation of lunar and solar calendars, which is essential for predicting seasons, scheduling festivals like Samhain and Imbolc, and planning the agricultural year with reliable accuracy. But how would such a calendar actually work? The proposed method is as elegant as it is simple. The cauldron would be filled with water, transforming its reflective surface into a passive observational instrument. Under the light of the sun or moon, the engraved markings around the rim would cast specific shadows or create reflections on the water's surface. A priest or astronomer could track the passage of time by observing how these light patterns interacted with the calibrated notations. A particular symbol might align with a reflection only on the day of a solstice, or a series of dots could be counted to mark the waxing and waning of the moon. This system turned a sacred vessel into a dynamic, interactive timepiece. This transforms our understanding of Celtic society. It moves them from the stereotypical image of fierce warriors and mystical druids to a culture of keen empirical observers and mathematicians. The knowledge required to create such a device, a deep understanding of celestial mechanics, precise metalworking skills to inscribe the markings accurately, and the mathematical ability to encode this data, places them firmly among the great astronomical traditions of the ancient world. The cauldron's dual purpose is a masterstroke of cultural integration. It wasn't hidden away in a scholar's study, it was at the very heart of communal life. During a great feast, the same vessel that provided nourishment for the tribe was also silently tracking the heavens, its contents and its carvings working in harmony to maintain the cosmic order. The druid presiding over the ceremony wasn't just a religious leader invoking the gods. He was a scientist reading the sky, using the most treasured object in the chieftain's possession to guide the entire community's future. The Celtic ritual cauldron, therefore, ceases to be a mere container for food or offerings. It becomes a profound statement of a world where the sacred and the scientific were one, where the rhythms of the heavens were literally mirrored in the water of their most cherished rituals, ensuring that the tribe's survival and its spirituality were forever intertwined. For centuries, the vibrant, tangled chords of the Incan Kippu presented a puzzle that most scholars felt comfortable solving with a single word: ritual. Found in sacred spaces and described by early Spanish chroniclers as objects used in divination and offerings to the gods, these intricate assemblages of knotted strings were neatly categorized as symbolic artifacts. They were thought to be the tools of priests, perhaps recording myths or serving as a physical medium for communication with the divine, their complex knots representing prayers or stories rather than data. This interpretation fit comfortably within a colonial perspective that often underestimated the administrative and intellectual sophistication of the cultures it encountered. The true, staggering complexity of the Kippu was hiding in plain sight, encrypted not in a code that was impossible to break, but in one that we simply hadn't learned how to read. The turning point began when researchers stopped asking what the Kippu were for and started asking how they worked. This shift in perspective revealed a device of breathtaking ingenuity. A Kippu is not a random collection of knots, it is a highly structured, logical system. It consists of a primary horizontal cord from which multiple pendant cords hang. Each of these pendants can then have its own subsidiary cords, creating a complex hierarchical data tree. The information is encoded through a brilliant, multi-variable language of knots. The position of a knot on its cord, whether it is near the top, the middle, or the bottom signifies its numerical place value, functioning like a decimal system. The type of knot, a figure 8, a long knot with a specific number of turns, or a simple overhand knot, represents units, tens, hundreds, and even thousands. But the language doesn't end there. The color of the cords, derived from an immense palette of natural dyes, adds another layer of meaning. A red cord might represent the Inca emperor himself, while a green cord could signify a specific crop like maize, and a brown cord might denote a particular region or tribe. The spin and ply direction of the twisted fibers themselves could even carry information, creating a data storage medium of remarkable density and flexibility. This was not a tool for vague spiritual musings. It was the administrative backbone of the largest empire in the pre-Columbian Americas. Imperial accountants, known as Kippu, literally, not keepers, used these devices to manage a vast and sprawling territory. They recorded everything, census data tracking the population of every village, meticulous inventories of grain stores in state warehouses, tributes owed and paid from conquered territories, and the organization of labor for massive public works projects. The Kippu was in effect the empire's database, its spreadsheet, and its tax ledger, all woven into a portable, durable, and incredibly efficient format. This system allowed the Inca to rule without a phonetic writing system as we know it, coordinating an empire of over 10 million people across some of the most challenging terrain on Earth with an efficiency that astonished and frustrated the Spanish conquistadors who could not decipher them. The most revolutionary and controversial theory, however, pushes the Kippu's function even further. Some researchers, like Harvard's Gary Urton, propose that certain complex Kippu may encode not just numerical data, but narrative history, literature, and even legal documents, a true written language made of fiber and knots. This suggests that the stories of emperors, the laws of the land, and the epic poems of the people were not solely oral traditions, but were physically preserved in these intricate structures. The Kippu was therefore more than an accountant. He was a librarian, a historian, and a scribe, capable of reading back complex information from the tactile language of knots. This transforms our understanding of the Kippu from a mere recording tool into a potential medium for all facets of Incan civilization. This incredible duality, the fact that the same object could be presented as a sacred offering in one context and consulted as a precise census record in another, is the ultimate expression of the Incan worldview. For the Inca, the state was a spiritual entity and the emperor was a divine ruler, managing the kingdom's resources, counting its people, and ensuring its prosperity were not separate from religious duty. They were the highest forms of it. Accurate data was a form of reverence, and the Kippu was the instrument that wove the tangible threads of empire into the sacred fabric of the cosmos. It stands as a monumental achievement, a testament to a culture that engineered a unique and brilliant technology to navigate the complex intersection of faith, power, and information. Now we arrive at an object that perhaps best encapsulates the entire spirit of our exploration, the medieval astrolabe. In the great cathedrals of Europe and the serene mosques of the Islamic world, these exquisitely crafted brass discs, often gilded and intricately engraved, were displayed with reverence. Adorned with verses from the Quran or images of Christian saints, they were seen by the faithful as profound symbols of divine order, a physical representation of the perfect, harmonious cosmos as created by God. To simply admire one in a religious setting was to feel a sense of awe and piety, but to pick it up, to hold its weight in your hands and understand its function, was to unlock the mind of a medieval scientist. This beautiful icon was, in truth, one of the most sophisticated portable computers ever invented before the modern era. the complexity of an astrolabe is a marvel to behold. It is a stack of precision-engineered brass plates, each one a map of the night sky for a specific latitude, rotating on a central pin. On top sits the reter, a delicate, web-like framework of pointers representing the brightest stars. The user would hold the instrument by its ring, suspending it so that the alidade, a rotating sighting rule, could be aimed at a specific star or the sun. By aligning these components, a skilled operator could solve a staggering array of problems. It could tell the time with remarkable accuracy, day or night. It could determine the direction of Mecca for daily prayers, calculate the height of a mountain, or predict the rising and setting of celestial bodies. For medieval scholars, it was a universal problem-solving tool, a handheld observatory that brought the vastness of the cosmos into the palm of one's hand. This seamless fusion of faith and function was no accident. It was the very engine of medieval intellectual life. In the Islamic Golden Age, the astrolabe was indispensable for fulfilling religious obligations. The requirement to pray 5 times a day at specific moments, defined by the sun's position, made accurate timekeeping a devotional act. Navigating the desert to make the Hajj pilgrimage required a way to find direction under the stars. Thus, the development of the astrolabe was driven by spiritual needs, yet it propelled incredible advancements in mathematics, astronomy, and metallurgy. Master craftsmen became artists of precision, and users became empirical observers of God's creation. When the astrolabe passed into medieval Europe, it was embraced with equal fervor by monastic scholars. In a Christian context, understanding the heavens was a way to comprehend the mind of God, to appreciate the clockwork perfection of His universe. The astrolabe made this abstract concept tangible. It was a tool for calculating the movable date of Easter and the feast days of the liturgical calendar, which are based on lunar and solar cycles. This practical necessity ensured its place in the scholarly toolkit, right alongside theological texts. The astrolabe, therefore, stands as a powerful symbol of a world not yet divided by the artificial barrier between science and religion. It was a device that inspired figures like Geoffrey Chaucer to write instructional treatises on its use and helped pave the way for the navigational tools that would later enable the age of exploration. It proves that the quest for empirical truth and the desire for spiritual understanding were once the very same journey, guided by the stars and measured in brass. Moving from the grand, interconnected systems of the Incan Empire, we find a profound sense of sacred precision in a much smaller, more intimate object, the Japanese Ofuda. To the casual observer, these are simply prayer tablets, slender pieces of wood, often found gracing home altars or tucked into the eaves of a shrine, inscribed with elegant calligraphy that invokes the protection of a kami or Shinto deity. They are items of pure faith, believed to be vessels for divine presence and blessings, and for many, that spiritual purpose is the beginning and the end of their story. Yet, a closer examination of certain historical Ofuda, particularly those associated with master temple builders, reveals a startling secret. Alongside the sacred text, one might find a series of meticulously carved, evenly spaced notches. The dimensions of the tablet itself are often crafted to an exacting standard, with a consistency that speaks not of freehand artistry, but of calibrated measurement. This is where the line between the spiritual and the practical beautifully blurs. In the world of traditional Japanese carpentry, particularly in the construction of shrines and temples, the concept of sacred geometry was paramount. These structures were not merely buildings, they were physical manifestations of harmony, designed to align with natural principles and please the gods who would inhabit them. For this harmony to be achieved, every component had to be in perfect proportion. A beam could not be simply long enough. It had to be the precisely correct length according to a complex system of ratios that ensured structural integrity and spiritual balance. This is where the Ofuda likely transitioned from a symbolic object to an essential tool. A master carpenter who was also a deeply spiritual artisan might have used his personal Ofuda as a trusted standard for measurement. The uniformly spaced markings on the tablet could serve as a quick reference for a specific unit of measurement, perhaps a traditional unit like the sun or shoku, ensuring that every craftsman working on the project was adhering to the same exacting scale. Imagine the scene on an ancient temple construction site. Before beginning his work for the day, a carpenter would offer a prayer at a small site shrine, holding his Ofuda with reverence. He would ask for divine guidance and protection in his dangerous and precise craft. Then, with the blessing received, he would take that very same tablet and lay it against a freshly planed piece of timber. He would use its precise edges to check for true straightness, and its carefully incised notches to mark out the intervals for joinery or the placement of pillars. In this single, elegant action, the tool served two inseparable purposes. It ensured the material perfection of the work, and it sanctified the act of creation itself. The sawdust falling from the wood was not just waste, it was part of a devotional act. The perfect fit of a joint was not just a technical achievement, it was a reflection of cosmic order. This practice demonstrates a core principle of Japanese culture known as takumi, the pursuit of perfection through craftsmanship, which is itself considered a form of spiritual discipline. The carpenter's devotion was expressed not through loud prayer alone, but through the silent, meticulous accuracy of his work. By using a consecrated object as a measuring standard, he was building the divine directly into the very bones of the structure. The Ofuda was the perfect instrument for this philosophy, a ruler disguised as a prayer, a unit of measure infused with a soul. It guaranteed that the sacred geometry of the temple was maintained down to the smallest detail, creating a space where the human and the divine could meet in perfect proportional harmony. Now we turn our attention to a challenge that united an entire civilization in a quest for both spiritual and geographical orientation, the Islamic requirement to face Mecca during prayer. For a faithful Muslim, the Qibla is a sacred direction, a unifying focus that connects the individual to the heart of their faith, no matter where they are in the world. This religious obligation, performed 5 times daily, presented a monumental scientific problem, especially as the Islamic Empire rapidly expanded across continents, from the shores of Spain to the borders of India. How could a traveler in a featureless desert or a settler in a distant, newly conquered city possibly know the correct direction to pray with any certainty? The answer was not left to guesswork or divine inspiration. It was solved with breathtaking ingenuity through the creation of precision instruments that were as beautiful as they were brilliant. These devices, often crafted from beautifully engraved brass or bronze, were long admired in museum collections as symbolic objects, ornate compasses or decorative astrolabes carried as markers of piety during the Hajj pilgrimage. Their intricate calligraphy and geometric patterns seem to speak only of faith, but to dismiss them as mere ornaments is to miss their true genius. These were, in fact, highly sophisticated Qibla finders, the result of centuries of advancement in astronomy, mathematics, and metallurgy. The most advanced versions combined multiple tools into one. They might feature a magnetic compass for a general bearing, but since magnetic north and true north differ, and the direction to Mecca is a great circle route, not a simple compass heading, these devices incorporated far more complex solutions. Many utilized astronomical alignments. A user could set the instrument for their current latitude, often indicated on a series of interchangeable plates, much like an astrolabe. Then, by aligning a sighting mechanism with the sun or a known star, they could calculate the azimuth, the angle along the horizon, to the holy city. The level of precision required was staggering. Islamic scientists had calculated the geographic coordinates of Mecca with remarkable accuracy, and they understood spherical trigonometry to project that point onto a flat map or a handheld instrument. This meant that a Qibla finder made in Cordoba would be calibrated completely differently from one made in Baghdad, accounting for the vast geographic variation across the empire. The elegant engravings on the device were not just decoration. They were often finely calibrated scales, tables of sign values, or diagrams of the Kaaba itself, all working in concert to guide the user. This fusion of deep devotion and empirical science is a powerful testament to the Islamic Golden Age. The drive to fulfill a religious duty with perfect accuracy became a powerful engine for innovation, pushing the boundaries of navigation, cartography, and instrument making. The same scholarly class that produced profound theological works also penned detailed astronomical treatises and manuals on the use of these very tools. In a very real sense, the quest to connect with God drove the creation of some of the most precise scientific instruments the world had ever seen. The Qibla finder, therefore, is more than a ritual object. It is a physical manifestation of a worldview that saw no conflict between prayer and precision, between faith and facts. It ensured that every believer, whether in a bustling city or alone under the desert stars, could align their heart and their body with unerring accuracy towards their spiritual home. Now let's shift from the grand scale of temples and empires to a much more personal object, one that could be worn around the neck, the Viking Thor's hammer amulet. For generations, these small, often crudely cast pendants were interpreted through a single, powerful lens. They were Mjolnir, the mighty hammer of the thunder god Thor, a potent symbol of protection against the forces of chaos represented by the giants. To wear one was to carry a piece of the divine into battle, to sea, or into the grave, a sacred charm to ward off evil and invite the gods' blessing. This spiritual significance is undeniable and deeply rooted in Norse mythology and saga. But what if this powerful symbol was also something far more mundane, and in its mundanity, even more revealing of the Viking spirit? A closer examination of several amulets reveals tiny details that tell a new story. On the flat, hammer-like head of some specimens, archaeologists have noted unusual patterns of wear, not the gentle polishing of a cord rubbing against a pendant, but distinct, flat abrasions along the edges. Furthermore, the angles of the hammerhead on certain examples are crafted with a surprising degree of precision, forming a perfect 90-degree right angle. These are not the hallmarks of a piece of jewelry that was only ever cherished. They are the subtle scars of a tool that was used. This evidence points towards a fascinating dual purpose. These small, heavy, and perfectly angled amulets would have made excellent miniature plumbobs or lightweight levels. A Viking shipwright, tasked with ensuring the keel of a longship was perfectly straight and true, might have slipped the amulet from his neck. By dangling it from its cord against the rising frame of the ship, he could check for vertical alignment. The same amulet that promised Thor's protection against the tempestuous sea could also guarantee the seaworthiness of the vessel that would brave it. Similarly, a carpenter constructing a hall could use the angled edges of the hammerhead to check the squareness of a joint, ensuring the structural integrity of the building that would house his family. This practical application transforms our understanding of the object. It was not merely a passive receptacle for faith, it was an active participant in the Viking world of making and building. This beautiful synergy between the spiritual and the practical is a profound insight into the Norse mindset. For the Vikings, the divine was not separate from the daily struggle for survival and prosperity. Thor was not only a god of thunder and battle, he was also a patron of farmers and common folk, a protector of the household and the community. What greater act of devotion could there be than to build a sound ship or a sturdy home? Using the hammer symbol to ensure that work was done with skill and precision was the highest form of honoring the god. It literally built his blessing into the very fabric of their world. The amulet, therefore, ceases to be a simple good luck charm. It becomes a testament to a culture that saw no divide between the sacred and the profane, between the strength asked of the gods and the strength applied by one's own hands. It was a tool that ensured both spiritual and structural integrity, allowing a Viking to carry a piece of his workshop into battle and a piece of his faith into his craft. Picture the scene in an ancient Egyptian temple. A priestess, bathed in the flickering light of oil lamps, raises a ceremonial instrument, the sistrum. Its distinctive shape is unmistakable, a bronze handle topped with a U-shaped frame, across which slide several loose metal rods. As she shakes it, the room fills with a rhythmic, shimmering jangle, a sound believed to please the goddess Hathor and drive away negative forces. For centuries, this was the accepted narrative. The sistrum was a sacred noisemaker, its function purely symbolic and ritualistic, its sound a form of spiritual static. But what if we've been listening to this instrument all wrong? What if that seemingly random jingle was, in fact, a carefully engineered sonic environment, and the sistrum itself was a precision tool for exploring the very mathematics of harmony? The first clue to this deeper purpose lies in its construction. These were not crudely made rattles. Examination of sistra from royal tombs reveals an astonishing level of craftsmanship. The metal loops or rods were not all identical. They were often of varying thicknesses and lengths, and they were meticulously tuned. When shaken, they did not produce a chaotic cacophony, but a complex interplay of specific frequencies. Furthermore, the handle itself was not merely a grip. It was often hollow, acting as a resonance chamber that would amplify certain tones and dampen others, much like the body of a guitar or violin. This is not the design of a simple ritual object. It is the design of an acoustic instrument built with intentionality. This is where the role of the Egyptian priest as a scholar becomes critical. These were not just religious figures, they were the mathematicians, astronomers, and scientists of their time. They possessed a profound understanding of mathematical ratios, a knowledge they applied to the construction of pyramids and the plotting of celestial events. It is a very small step to apply that same mathematical mind to the world of sound. The Greek philosopher Pythagoras would later famously discover that the musical intervals we find pleasing, the perfect fifth, the perfect fourth, are based on simple whole number ratios of string length. There is compelling evidence to suggest the ancient Egyptians were exploring these same principles centuries earlier. Imagine a priest, away from the public ceremony, experimenting with a sistrum. By carefully adjusting the thickness of a metal rod or slightly bending its shape, they could change its pitch. By observing the interactions between these pitches, how certain combinations created a sense of tension or resolution, they were effectively mapping the harmonic series. They were conducting early experiments in acoustics. This had a direct and powerful application back in the temple. If a specific ritual was intended to invoke a deity of chaos, perhaps a dissonant, clashing set of intervals was used. If the goal was to promote harmony and order, or mat, then perfectly consonant, ratio-based harmonies would be employed. The sistrum becomes a device for generating a specific psychological and spiritual state through controlled acoustic physics. This transforms our understanding of Egyptian ritual from a purely symbolic performance into a multi-sensory, scientifically informed practice. The sistrum was not just making noise for the gods, it was using the divine language of mathematics to create a precise sonic atmosphere, aligning the temple with the same harmonic order that governed the cosmos. It stands as a stunning example of their holistic worldview, where art, science, and spirituality were not separate disciplines, but interconnected expressions of a unified truth. The priestess shaking the sistrum was both a musician and a physicist, performing a sacred rite that was also a sophisticated experiment in the very principles of the universe. Among the sun-baked ruins of Minoan palaces on Crete, archaeologists have unearthed small, unassuming objects that tell a story far grander than their size would suggest, intricately carved clay seals. For decades, the prevailing interpretation of these artifacts, particularly those bearing the iconic labyrinth pattern, seemed settled. They were ritual objects, pure and simple. Perhaps they were amulets for protection, stamped onto soft clay to ward off evil spirits. Maybe they were used in initiation rites, a physical symbol of one's journey through the metaphorical maze of a mystery cult. Their connection to the powerful myth of the Minotaur and the labyrinth built by Daedalus made this spiritual explanation feel complete. The seal was a token of faith, a tiny piece of myth made tangible. But what if these seals held a much more down-to-earth secret? What if the labyrinth wasn't just a story, but a blueprint? A meticulous re-examination of these seals reveals a detail that the purely ritual interpretation overlooks: their astonishing geometric precision. The labyrinth pattern on these seals is not a freehand doodle or a loosely symbolic scribble. The lines are perfectly straight, the angles are exact, and the spacing between the parallel paths of the maze is remarkably consistent. This level of exactitude is the hallmark of a draftsman, not just a priest. Furthermore, when these patterns are scaled up, they correspond with uncanny accuracy to the layouts of certain Minoan architectural features. The complex, winding corridors of the great palaces themselves, like Knossos, echo the labyrinthine design, but the connection goes beyond mere resemblance. The same pattern appears in the layout of sophisticated irrigation channels and water management systems that the Minoans engineered with such skill. This correlation is too specific to be coincidental. This is where the function of the seal transforms. It becomes a precision template, a master pattern for replication. Imagine a Minoan master builder or engineer, tasked with ensuring that a complex drainage system for a new wing of the palace was constructed correctly. Instead of painstakingly sketching the entire labyrinthine layout on the ground for the work crew, he could simply press his personal seal into a patch of wet clay or wax. This created a perfect miniature model of the required pattern. The workers could then use this impression as a guide, scaling it up to mark out the trenches and channels with perfect accuracy and consistency every single time. The seal ensured that a complex, effective design could be replicated across the island without deviation, preserving the engineering knowledge that made Minoan civilization so advanced. This practical application adds a breathtaking new layer to the myth of the labyrinth. The story of Daedalus, the genius craftsman who built the maze to contain the Minotaur, suddenly reads less like a pure fantasy and more like a cultural memory of a real, brilliant engineer. The labyrinth was not just a terrifying prison, it was a testament to a mastery of complex, precise construction. The seal, therefore, becomes a key that unlocks this duality. It was a ritual object that also happened to be an essential piece of engineering equipment. By embedding this functional knowledge within a sacred symbol, the Minoans ensured its preservation. The design of the water system was too vital to the community's survival to be lost. By making it a religious icon, it was protected, passed down through generations of priests and craftsmen who may not have fully understood its hydraulic engineering principles but revered its symbolic power. The Greek labyrinth seal stands as a powerful metaphor for the Minoan mind, a culture that saw no conflict between the mystical and the mechanical, and that encoded the secrets of its earthly survival within its most enduring myths. High on the windswept plains of North America, silhouetted against the sky on a remote mountain ridge, sits one of the most evocative and misunderstood structures of the ancient world, the Bighorn medicine wheel. For generations, the prevailing interpretation from outside observers was a romantic, yet limited one. These stone circles were seen as purely ceremonial sacred spaces where tribal healers conducted rituals, where vision quests were undertaken, and where communities gathered for prayer and spiritual renewal. This view, while not incorrect, captured only a fraction of the story, reducing a masterpiece of integrated knowledge to a single, mystical dimension. The true purpose of the medicine wheel was hiding in plain sight, written not in books, but in the alignment of its stones with the cosmos itself. The breakthrough in understanding came when researchers began to apply the tools of archaeoastronomy, the study of how ancient peoples understood the phenomena in the sky and how they used that knowledge. By carefully mapping the Bighorn wheel's 28 spokes radiating from a central cairn and its 6 smaller outer cairns, a stunning pattern emerged. These stone features were not placed at random. They functioned as a permanent, land-based observatory of breathtaking accuracy. Specific spokes and cairns align perfectly with the horizon points where the sun rises and sets on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. Others pinpoint the rise of certain crucial stars like Sirius or Aldebaran just before dawn, a phenomenon known as heliacal rising, which served as a precise seasonal marker for cultures without written calendars. This celestial engineering transformed the wheel from a static shrine into a dynamic, communal calendar and planning tool. The summer solstice alignment wasn't just a date, it was a critical signal. Its arrival marked the brief, fertile window when the high plains were passable and game was abundant, dictating the timing of the buffalo hunt that would sustain the tribe through the long winter. The rise of a specific star might indicate the moment to begin a seasonal migration to lower elevations, or to gather certain medicinal plants when their potency was at its peak. This knowledge was a matter of survival, and the medicine wheel was the instrument that made it reliable, repeatable, and accessible to the entire community. This incredible duality is the wheel's true genius. It was never an either/, or proposition, either a temple or an observatory. It was a profound and a tribal elder conducting a healing ceremony at the central cairn was not separate from the astronomer noting a star's position. They were often the same person, their role encompassing both the spiritual and the practical stewardship of their people. The act of reading the sky was itself a form of prayer, a way of attuning human activity to the sacred order of the universe. By building their calendar from stone and aligning it with the heavens, these indigenous scientists were literally grounding their spirituality in the observable, predictable rhythms of nature. The medicine wheel stands as a timeless testament to a holistic worldview, where every stone tells a story of survival, every alignment sings a hymn to the stars, and the path to the divine was walked with both reverence and empirical precision. Amidst the profound spiritual fervor of the Renaissance, an era of explosive artistic and scientific discovery, one object was ubiquitous in the hands of the devout: the rosary. To the outside observer, these strings of beads were purely articles of faith exquisitely crafted from amber, jet, or even precious metals, each bead a stepping stone on a meditative journey through the sacred mysteries of the Christian faith. The repetitive recitation of prayers counted on these beads was a discipline of the soul, a way to achieve focus and connect with the divine. This interpretation is so powerful that it has largely defined the rosary for centuries. But the Renaissance was also a time of burgeoning commerce, complex banking, and scientific inquiry, a world that demanded new tools for calculation. And it is here that we find one of history's most elegant and discreet convergences of devotion and data. Look closer at some of these historical rosaries, particularly those owned by the merchant classes or scholarly clerics, and you begin to notice subtle anomalies. While many are uniform, some feature beads grouped in unusual sequences, or include larger, distinct spacer beads that break the standard pattern. The beads themselves might be of slightly different sizes or textures, creating a tactile variation that goes beyond mere decoration. These are the telltale signs of a device that was doing double duty. For a merchant navigating the bustling markets of Florence or Antwerp, the need for quick, reliable calculation was constant. The price of goods, the exchange of currencies, the calculation of interest and profit. This was the lifeblood of their world, yet the tools for such tasks were cumbersome. The counting board, or abacus, was a fixture on every merchant's desk, but it was not portable. This is where the rosary in their pocket or draped over their belt became ingeniously repurposed. The standardized groups of beads, the decades of the rosary, provided a perfect base 10 system. A merchant could silently run his fingers over the beads, using the smaller Ave Maria beads to count units and the larger Pater Noster beads to mark tens or hundreds. By assigning values to the different bead types, a user could perform addition, subtraction, and even complex multiplication. A trader could swiftly tally the total cost of a shipment of silk or calculate a foreign exchange rate, all under the guise of pious contemplation. In an age where the open pursuit of profit could still be viewed with suspicion by the church, this was a perfect camouflage. The rosary allowed a merchant to be both a man of God and a man of business, his spiritual devotion providing the perfect cover for his commercial calculations. For scholars and men of science, the utility was equally profound. The same beads used to count prayers could also be used to tally astronomical observations, track the results of experiments, or work through mathematical sequences. A monk studying the motion of planets could use his rosary to count intervals, or a physician could track dosages and symptoms. This practice reflects the deeply intertwined nature of Renaissance life, where the worlds of the cathedral and the university were not yet separate. A figure like Nicolaus Copernicus was himself a church canon. His revolutionary astronomical work was conducted within a framework of faith. For such a man, a tool that served both his devotional and his scientific needs would have been not just convenient but perfectly logical. The Renaissance rosary, therefore, is far more than a string of prayers. It is a physical symbol of a worldview that had not yet compartmentalized the different facets of human endeavor. It was an object that allowed its user to navigate the complexities of a rapidly changing world without ever having to choose between the spiritual and the practical, proving that even in the quietest act of devotion, there could hum a powerful engine of commerce and discovery. Within the opulent chambers of the Ottoman court, amidst the scent of incense and the murmur of scholarly debate, we find objects that seem to belong purely to the realm of mysticism. Intricately carved dice, polished metal mirrors, and beautifully inlaid boards used for divination practices like Fal. For centuries, these items were dismissed by Western historians as mere superstition, the quaint paraphernalia of fortune tellers catering to the whims of the Sultan's court. Their function appeared entirely spiritual, a way to seek guidance from unseen forces or to entertain the elite with predictions of love and fortune. This surface interpretation, however, misses a far more fascinating and intellectually rigorous truth hidden in plain sight. A meticulous examination of these so-called superstitious items reveals a startling level of physical precision that hints at a much deeper purpose. Take, for instance, a set of dice crafted from ivory or semi-precious stone, discovered not in a marketplace stall, but in the private library of a royal astrologer. Unlike common dice, these are not mere cubes. They are multifaceted, with faces that are perfectly symmetrical and edges that are precisely beveled. Their weight is meticulously balanced, ensuring that no single side is favored by a hidden bias. This isn't the craftsmanship of a simple toy maker. It's the work of an artisan who understood the principles of geometry and physics. Similarly, the mirrors used for scrying were not just any reflective surfaces. They were ground to a specific curvature and polished to an optical clarity that would have required advanced knowledge of metallurgy and lens making. This pursuit of perfection in their physical form is the first major clue that these objects were doing more than just telling fortunes. This is where we must reimagine the role of the Ottoman scholar, or alim. These were not mere mystics. They were the inheritors of a vast intellectual tradition that spanned mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. In the relatively permissive intellectual environment of the early Ottoman Empire, particularly within the confines of the palace, these scholars had the freedom to explore complex ideas. However, the direct, open study of randomness and chance could be philosophically and theologically contentious, as it might be seen to challenge the concept of divine predestination, or qadar. The practice of divination provided the perfect intellectual camouflage. Under the acceptable guise of seeking omens, a group of scholars could gather to roll these precision dice hundreds, perhaps thousands of times. They weren't waiting for a mystical sign. They were meticulously recording the outcomes, amassing raw data on frequency and distribution. This clandestine data collection was a foundational step in the study of probability. By tracking the results of these ritual throws, these early scientists could begin to discern patterns in randomness. They could observe the law of large numbers in action, the principle that while a single roll is unpredictable, the outcome of many rolls becomes remarkably consistent. A game that used these dice to move pieces across a board wasn't just a pastime. It was a sophisticated model for exploring decision-making under conditions of uncertainty, a precursor to modern game theory. The mirrored surfaces used to see the future could have served a dual purpose as well. Their precise curvature made them useful for studying reflections and angles, contributing to early optics, while the act of scrying itself encouraged a state of focused contemplation, not unlike that used by a mathematician deep in thought on a complex problem. This brilliant synthesis of entertainment and inquiry, of ritual and research, demonstrates a profound intellectual flexibility. The Ottoman court became a laboratory where the seemingly irrational was used to explore the rational. The tools of the fortune teller were, in truth, the instruments of the proto-statistician. This innovative approach allowed the empire's greatest minds to push the boundaries of knowledge while remaining within the framework of their culture and faith, proving that the path to scientific discovery can sometimes be hidden within the most unexpected of rituals. Now we venture into the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, where we encounter one of the most striking examples of this duality, the Babylonian liver model. To the uninitiated, these clay objects are profoundly strange. Meticulously crafted into the shape of a sheep's liver, they are divided into dozens of sections, each one inscribed with dense, cryptic cuneiform text predicting specific fates: the outcome of a battle, the health of a king, the fortune of a harvest. For centuries, this practice, known as hepatoscopy, was the epitome of what modern scholars dismissed as primitive superstition. The entire ritual seemed like pure magic. A specially trained priest, known as a baru, would sacrifice a sheep, examine its liver, and then read the marks and discolorations on the organ like a map of the future, consulting these clay models as a guide. It was easy to view this as the height of irrational belief, a practice completely divorced from reality. But that superficial interpretation collapses under the weight of the evidence, revealing a practice that was, in fact, a sophisticated fusion of divination and early medical science. The first clue to this deeper purpose is the astonishing anatomical accuracy of the models themselves. These were not abstract shapes or symbolic representations. They are precise, three-dimensional replicas of a sheep's liver, correctly depicting the distinct lobes, the impression of the gallbladder, the portal vein, and other specific features. The cuneiform inscriptions aren't random prophecies scrawled anywhere. They are carefully placed in specific zones that correspond to these actual anatomical structures. This level of precision required something that is often overlooked: a deep, systematic knowledge of visceral anatomy gained through repeated, hands-on dissection. The Baru priests weren't just mystics, they were among the world's first practicing anatomists, performing a detailed autopsy on every single animal they sacrificed. This daily, practical engagement with anatomy provided a massive, cumulative database of knowledge about the internal workings of a living creature. This is where the practice transforms from pure fortune-telling into a form of early diagnostics. The core principle of hepatoscopy was based on a logical, albeit pre-scientific, cause and effect relationship. The Babylonians believed the gods communicated their will through the natural world, and what could be more direct than the organs of a sacred sacrificial animal? If the liver of a particular sheep showed an unusual lesion, a dark spot, or an abnormal texture, and then a plague broke out in the city a week later, the two events were recorded as connected. Over generations, these observations were compiled into vast, detailed manuals, the clay models themselves being portable versions of these texts. A priest would compare the liver of the newly sacrificed sheep against the model. If he found a mark in Zone 12 that the manual associated with the anger of the god Adad leading to poor harvests, that was his diagnosis. But let's rephrase that diagnosis in modern terms. If the sheep's liver showed signs of parasitic infection or disease, it could very well indicate that the grazing lands or water sources were contaminated, which would indeed lead to poor harvests and sickness in the community. The curse was a biological pathogen. Therefore, the Baru priest was performing a critical public health service. He was a medical detective, using the condition of the sheep's liver as a proxy for the health of the entire ecosystem, and by extension, the people who lived within it. His ritual pronouncement about the god's anger was the cultural language used to prescribe action: purify the water sources, quarantine the sick, or move the flock to new pastures. The clay model was his training manual and his reference guide, ensuring that this vital diagnostic knowledge was passed down accurately. This practice reveals a sophisticated understanding of correlation long before the development of formal statistics. It created a bridge between observable physical signs in the present and probable outcomes in the future, which is the very foundation of both medical prognosis and scientific prediction. The Babylonian liver model, therefore, stands as a powerful testament to a culture that sought to understand and control the uncertainties of life. It was a tool that allowed them to diagnose the health of their world, using the only language and framework they had, a framework that was not primitive magic, but a brilliant, if beautifully disguised, form of early empirical science. High in the serene, thin air of the Himalayas, the gentle, rhythmic whir of a prayer wheel is a sound as constant as the mountain wind. To the devout Buddhist, the handheld mani wheel is a profound spiritual technology. Each clockwise rotation, propelled by a gentle flick of the wrist, is believed to send the sacred mantra Om Mani Padme Hum out into the universe, accumulating merit, purifying negative karma, and benefiting all sentient beings. For generations, observers from outside this tradition saw these objects as the embodiment of pure faith, beautifully crafted cylinders, often made of silver or brass, filled with tightly rolled prayers and turned with devout intention. The function appeared to be entirely devotional, a kinetic form of meditation, but this interpretation, while deeply true on one level, only captures a fraction of the story. A closer examination, particularly of the massive, stationary wheels found in monastery courtyards, reveals a hidden layer of mechanical genius that seamlessly merges the spiritual with the scientific. The first clue lies in the engineering of the wheel's movement itself. The handheld versions are masterclasses in ergonomic efficiency, designed to spin with minimal friction and maximum smoothness for thousands of rotations. However, the larger, fixed wheels, some standing taller than a person, incorporate a level of mechanical sophistication that goes far beyond the requirements of simple rotation. Historical examples, particularly those connected to the great monastic universities of Tibet, feature intricate gear trains and escapement mechanisms hidden within their central shaft. These are not the components of a simple cylinder, they are the hallmarks of a timing device. The gears are precisely cut to regulate the wheel's spin, ensuring a consistent, measurable rate of rotation rather than a random, freely spinning motion. This precise control is the key that unlocks a potential secondary function, timekeeping. Imagine a monk embarking on a long, solitary meditation session, a practice requiring immense discipline that is often structured around specific time intervals. A large prayer wheel with its regulated spin could serve as a perfect, silent timer. By initiating a single, powerful rotation and knowing the exact rate at which the internal gears would slow its momentum, the monk could measure the passage of a predetermined period, perhaps the length of time it takes to recite a certain number of mantras or the duration of a specific contemplative stage. The end of the session would be marked not by a jarring alarm, but by the gradual, gentle cessation of the wheel's familiar whir, a soft signal seamlessly integrated into the meditative environment. This application extends beyond the meditation hall. The same gearing principles could be applied to much larger wheels, perhaps even those turned by water or wind, to track longer astronomical cycles or mark the intervals for changing ritual guards throughout the night. The prayer wheel transforms from a passive receptacle for prayers into an active participant in the monastery's daily rhythm, its mechanical heart beating in time with the schedule of spiritual life. This beautiful synthesis is a profound expression of Tibetan Buddhist philosophy, which sees no fundamental separation between the inner world of the mind and the outer world of phenomena. The pursuit of inner peace, or Xinjiang, is not an abstract concept. It is a disciplined practice that can be supported by external structure and precision. The perfectly balanced prayer wheel, with its smooth, controlled rotation, becomes a physical metaphor for a calm, focused, and disciplined mind, a mind that is not subject to the erratic spins of distraction but moves with purposeful, mindful intention. The craftsman who built the intricate gearing within the wheel was not just an artisan. He was a contributor to the spiritual practice of his community, engineering a tool that supported both devotion and discipline. The Tibetan prayer wheel, therefore, stands as a timeless testament to a culture that harnessed the principles of mechanics in the service of enlightenment, creating a perfect harmony between the turning of the wheel and the turning of the mind towards peace. Perched high upon the soaring buttresses and spires of a Gothic cathedral, the gargoyle presents a striking paradox of form and function. To the faithful masses below, these grotesque and often terrifying figures were far more than mere decoration. They were stone sentinels, their grimacing faces and bestial forms believed to ward off evil spirits and protect the sacred ground from demonic influence. This powerful spiritual symbolism is an undeniable part of their story, a narrative carved in stone for all to see. Yet, to focus solely on this protective role is to miss a more ingenious and practical truth hidden in their very anatomy. A closer look reveals that these stone monsters are, in fact, masterpieces of medieval hydraulics and meteorology, designed with a brilliance that served the community in profoundly tangible ways. The most obvious function, of course, is as a waterspout. The word gargoyle itself derives from the French gargouille, meaning throat or gullet, and it is this feature that defines its primary duty. The stonemasons who carved them were not just sculptors but expert engineers. They designed the gargoyle's open mouth and the elongated neck leading to it as a precisely calculated conduit. The channel running through its body is shaped to accelerate the flow of rainwater collected from the vast cathedral roof, projecting it far away from the building's foundation walls. This was a critical innovation. Without these ingenious spouts, torrents of water would cascade down the cathedral's stone faces, eroding the soft mortar, seeping into the walls, and undermining the structural integrity of the entire edifice over time. The gargoyle, therefore, was the first line of defense in preserving the physical church, a practical solution disguised as a mythological guardian. But the ingenuity doesn't stop there. On certain cathedrals, particularly those associated with large monastic communities that managed vast agricultural lands, some gargoyles and their simpler cousins, the grotesques, feature a subtle yet astounding addition: a series of finely carved, calibrated markings along their spines or sides. These are not random decorative lines, they are measurement scales. During a rainstorm, a monk tasked with overseeing the monastery's granges could simply observe how far the rainwater rose against these markings as it flowed through the gargoyle's channel. This provided a surprisingly accurate measure of rainfall over a specific area, the cathedral roof itself acting as a giant catchment basin. This data was not collected for abstract curiosity. It was vital intelligence for survival. By knowing how much rain had fallen, the monastic community could make informed predictions about crop yields, plan the planting and harvesting schedules for their fields, manage water storage in cisterns, and even anticipate potential floods or droughts that could threaten the local population. This transforms our understanding of these iconic figures. The gargoyle ceases to be a one-dimensional monster and becomes a multifaceted community tool. It was at once a spiritual protector, a structural engineer, and a meteorological instrument. This breathtaking integration of roles is a perfect symbol of the medieval monastic worldview. For the monks, the care of the soul and the care of the community were inseparable duties. A beautifully carved hymn was an act of devotion, but so was an accurately predicted harvest that would feed the hungry. The cathedral itself was not an isolated monument to faith but the beating heart of a complex social and economic organism. Every aspect of its design, right down to the terrifying rain spouts, was intended to serve this holistic purpose. The gargoyle, with its calibrated spine, embodies this philosophy perfectly. It stands as a stone testament to an era that saw no conflict between the sacred and the scientific, where the path to heaven was built with a practical understanding of the earthly world, and where even a demonic-looking waterspout could hold the key to a community's prosperity. Now let's step into the dim, smoke-filled workshop of a medieval alchemist, a place shrouded in secrecy and symbolism. Here, surrounded by cryptic texts and strange ingredients, we, we find one of the most iconic tools of the trade, the alembic. To the uninitiated, and even to many patrons funding these experiments, this intricate glass apparatus was a vessel of pure mysticism. Its purpose was legendary and audacious: to achieve the magnum opus, the great work of transforming base lead into perfect gold, a process that was not merely chemical but deeply spiritual. It represented the purification of the soul, the ascent from the gross material world to a state of divine perfection. The entire practice was veiled in allegory, with each step of the process corresponding to a stage of inner enlightenment. The alembic, therefore, was seen as a sacred crucible for this metaphysical transformation, a symbol of the alchemist's quest to unlock the secrets of creation itself. This mystical interpretation was the public face of alchemy, a clever and necessary disguise for what was really happening within those fragile glass walls. Because when we look past the mystical symbols and the allegorical texts, we see the alembic for what it truly was, a brilliantly designed piece of scientific hardware, the direct ancestor of the modern chemistry lab's distillation equipment. Its design was one of elegant precision. It consisted of two main parts, the cucurbit, a large pot-like vessel where the raw material was heated, and the alembic proper, a cap that fit snugly on top with a long, tapering spout, the beak. As the material in the cucurbit was heated, it would vaporize. Those vapors would rise into the dome of the alembic cap, where they would then condense back into liquid on the cooler glass surface and trickle down into the spout, channeling the purified distillate into a waiting collection flask. This process of heating, vaporizing, and condensing is the very heart of distillation, a fundamental technique for separating mixtures and purifying substances. The alchemists didn't just stumble upon this, they perfected it through generations of trial and error, creating glassware of increasingly sophisticated shapes to maximize efficiency and purity. The gentle slope of the dome, the precise angle of the beak, every curve was engineered to control the flow of vapors and liquids with remarkable effectiveness. This is where the fascinating duality of the alchemist emerges. Publicly, they were mystics and dreamers, speaking the language of astrology and spirituality to describe their work. But in the privacy of their labs, they were meticulous experimental scientists. They used these alembics to systematically explore the properties of matter. They weren't just trying to make gold, they were discovering how to concentrate alcohols, isolate essential oils from plants, and produce potent acids like nitric acid and sulfuric acid, which would become the workhorses of future chemistry. Their detailed, if secretive, notes contain some of the earliest recorded observations of chemical reactions, phase changes, and the properties of newly isolated compounds. The spiritual allegory of purification was a perfect metaphor for their very real, physical process of distillation, removing impurities to reveal a substance's true, pure essence. This need for secrecy was not just for dramatic effect. In an era where innovation could be seen as heresy or witchcraft, the language of ritual and religion provided a protective shield. A noble patron might fund an experiment to seek the philosopher's stone, but that funding also unknowingly supported the alchemist's true passion, basic research into the nature of reality. The alembic was the perfect tool for this double life. Its mystical appearance satisfied the patrons looking for magic, while its precise function advanced the boundaries of material science. The work conducted with these vessels quietly laid the entire groundwork for modern chemistry. The methods they developed, the substances they isolated, and the experimental mindset they fostered, all hidden under the cover of ancient ritual, would eventually fuel the chemical revolution. The alchemist's alembic, therefore, stands as a powerful testament to the often hidden path of progress. It proves that the desire to understand and transform the material world can flourish even under the most constrained circumstances, using the language of the spirit to secretly decode the laws of matter. Across the diverse cultures of Africa, from the Yoruba of West Africa to other traditions, we find divination boards that present a stunning visual language of art and symbolism. To an outside observer, these objects are often seen as the centerpiece of spiritual consultation, intricately carved wooden trays or boards, dusted with powder and marked with complex, seemingly random patterns by a diviner or babalawo, as he casts palm nuts or shells to discern the will of the gods and provide guidance to a seeker. The patterns, known as Odu in the Ifa tradition, were long interpreted by anthropologists as a sacred but essentially arbitrary code, a mystical lexicon understood only by the initiated to translate divine messages. This view, while respectful of the ritual's spiritual power, completely overlooked the staggering intellectual structure operating just beneath the surface. Recent interdisciplinary studies are now revealing that these boards are not merely symbolic maps of the spirit world. They are, in fact, sophisticated combinatorial calculators, physical representations of a complex mathematical system used to model probability and navigate the uncertainties of life. The genius of this system lies in its binary foundation, a concept that predates modern computing by centuries. The core mechanic involves casting a chain of palm nuts or cowrie shells. Each throw has two possible outcomes, often conceptualized as open or closed, creating a binary digit or bit of information. A full divination session requires a series of these throws, typically 16, which generates a specific binary sequence. This sequence corresponds to one of 256 possible Odu, or canonical figures, that form the foundation of the Ifa literary corpus. Each Odu is not a single prediction, but a vast category of poetry, parables, historical narratives, and prescribed solutions. The diviner's role is to recite the specific verses associated with the revealed Odu that are most relevant to the client's situation. This process is far from random chance. It is a highly structured method of problem solving that uses randomness as an input to select from a vast, pre-existing database of knowledge. This is where the divination board transforms from a ritual object into a mathematical game board. The patterns traced in the powder are physical diagrams of these binary sequences and their interrelationships. The board itself becomes a workspace for visualizing combinatorial possibilities. With 256 primary Odu, the number of potential combinations and interactions between them is astronomically large, creating a framework of immense complexity for exploring cause and effect, action and consequence. The diviner, through years of memorization and study, learns to navigate this complex web. He is not a passive channel for spirits but an active analyst, a living algorithm who uses the random binary input to access a specific node in a vast network of stored information. He then applies critical interpretative skill to match the client's real-world problem with the most appropriate wisdom from that node. This practice represents a monumental achievement in abstract thought. It demonstrates a deep, intuitive grasp of probability, combinatorics, and systems analysis, all developed within a cultural and spiritual context. The board and the casting process provided a structured, repeatable method for decision-making under uncertainty, a way to break down overwhelming life choices: when to plant, whom to marry, how to handle a dispute, into a manageable process of consultation and reflection. It fostered a form of rational deliberation disguised as ritual, allowing individuals and communities to make difficult choices with a sense of divine sanction and collective wisdom. This system beautifully wove together the artistic expression of the carved board, the spiritual authority of the oracle, and the mathematical rigor of its structure. It stands as a powerful testament to an intellectual tradition where art, religion, and science were not separate disciplines but integrated threads in the fabric of daily life, proving that the path to understanding life's complexities can be found in the elegant interplay of pattern and chance. Imagine a Byzantine basilica shimmering with gold mosaics where the air is thick with incense and devotion. Here, in a side chapel, rests an object of breathtaking beauty, a reliquary. Crafted from gold, enamel, and precious gems, it is a miniature architectural masterpiece designed to house a fragment of a saint's bone or a piece of the true cross. For the faithful, this container is not merely a box, it is a sacred bridge to the divine, a vessel so holy that its spiritual power overshadows its physical form. Its purpose seems entirely transcendent, a focal point for veneration and prayer. But what if this object of pure reverence held a secret, a hidden function that connected the heavenly to the hilariously mundane? A closer examination of some of these exquisite containers reveals a truth that is both shocking and brilliantly pragmatic. Concealed within their ornate structures, perhaps integrated into the base, hidden by a cunningly hinged panel, or even incorporated into the figurines of saints that adorn the lid are the delicate mechanisms of a precision balance scale, tiny counterweights, finely wrought pivots, and a perfectly balanced beam. This discovery transforms our understanding of the reliquary entirely. It was not just a spiritual safe, it was also a highly accurate weighing instrument. But why would such a thing be necessary within the hallowed walls of a church? The answer lies in the very heart of Byzantine society, an empire that was a dizzying fusion of deep piety and ruthless commercial acumen. The church was not an isolated sanctuary, it was a major economic powerhouse. It received vast donations of gold and precious gems from emperors and wealthy patrons, often given as offerings to gain divine favor or to atone for sins. These donations weren't just symbolic, they were a critical part of the imperial economy. Furthermore, the church itself was a prodigious patron of the arts, commissioning goldsmiths and enamelers to create its sacred vessels. In both receiving and commissioning such work, the ability to precisely weigh raw materials was essential. A donated gold coin had to be verified for its true weight to ensure it wasn't a debased forgery. The gold and gems given to a master craftsman for a new chalice had to be measured out with absolute accuracy to account for every gram of precious material. The reliquary provided the perfect and perfectly discreet solution. What better place to house the standard weights for the empire's most valuable commodities than within the most sacred, untouchable objects imaginable? The sanctity of the reliquary guaranteed the integrity of the weights themselves. To tamper with them would be an act of sacrilege of the highest order, a powerful deterrent against the fraud that was commonplace in ancient marketplaces. This system allowed a bishop or a church treasurer to conduct high-stakes financial transactions with an air of unimpeachable authority. He could receive a donation of gold, open the reliquary, an act that itself would have been surrounded with ritual solemnity, and carefully weigh the offering on the very scales embedded in the saint's shrine. The same object that inspired awe and spiritual fear also ensured economic fairness and accuracy. This practice extended beyond mere donations. The Byzantines were also the heirs to alchemical traditions, and the church often housed scholars who explored the transformation of matter. The precise scales within a reliquary could have been used to measure minute quantities of reagents for experiments, once again blending the quest for spiritual enlightenment with empirical investigation. This incredible duality is a masterclass in Byzantine worldview. They saw no contradiction in this merger of the spiritual and the commercial. In fact, they believed that economic order and honest dealing were expressions of divine order on earth. To cheat on a weight was not just a crime against a customer, it was a sin against the harmony of God's creation. By placing a scale inside a reliquary, they were making a profound statement. True holiness encompassed every aspect of life, including commerce. Honesty in trade was a form of worship, and the tools of trade could be as sacred as the relics of the saints. The Byzantine reliquary, therefore, stands as a glittering symbol of a culture that operated on multiple levels simultaneously. It was a tomb for a saint, a bank vault, a certifier of value, and a scientific instrument, all fused into one breathtaking object of art and faith. It ensured that in the Byzantine Empire, the path to heaven was measured in carats, and your word was only as good as your weight. Deep within the tombs of Mesoamerican royalty, alongside jade masks and ceremonial blades, archaeologists have uncovered objects of captivating and eerie beauty, mirrors crafted not from glass but from a single, flawless piece of obsidian. Volcanic glass, when worked with incredible skill and patience, can be polished to a finish so smooth and so flawless that it becomes capable of producing a reflection with startling, if somewhat dark and smoky, clarity. For a long time, the interpretation of these artifacts was confined to the spiritual realm. They were described in colonial texts as the tools of powerful shamans and priests, used for the practice of scrying, the art of gazing into a reflective surface to see visions of the future, communicate with deities, or uncover hidden truths. To the Spanish conquistadors, this was pure sorcery, a dark and superstitious practice that confirmed their view of indigenous cultures as primitive. The mirror was a window to the spirit world, and its function, it seemed, ended there. But this interpretation, like the reflections in the mirror itself, only showed half of the picture. A closer, more scientific examination reveals a tool of astonishing optical sophistication, one that demonstrates a practical understanding of light and reflection that rivals any contemporary technology elsewhere in the world. The first clue to this deeper purpose lies in the incredible craftsmanship required to create these objects. Shaping and polishing a block of brittle obsidian into a perfectly flat or subtly curved surface without modern tools is a feat of immense skill and dedication. The surfaces of the finest examples are not merely shiny. They are optically precise, with a curvature so consistent that it could only be achieved through a rigorous, systematic process of grinding and polishing, likely using progressively finer abrasives like quartz sand or powdered hematite. This pursuit of perfection suggests a function that demanded accuracy far beyond what was necessary for a purely symbolic object. A shaman looking for vague shapes in the gloom wouldn't need a mirror of such flawless quality. An engineer, however, would. This level of precision opens the door to a host of practical applications that align perfectly with the needs of these advanced civilizations. One of the most compelling theories is that these mirrors served as essential tools for astronomical observation. While they couldn't magnify like a telescope, a perfectly flat obsidian mirror could be used in a principle known as reflection. A priest astronomer could use the mirror to safely observe the reflection of the sun, tracking its path across the sky to mark solstices and equinoxes with greater accuracy than the naked eye could allow, avoiding the blinding glare of direct observation. Even more intriguing is the possibility that a slightly concave mirror could be used to start a fire by focusing the sun's rays, a practical application that could also be imbued with deep ritual significance, symbolically capturing the power of the sun god himself. But the utility of these mirrors may have extended far beyond the temple precincts. In the dense jungles and across the wide valleys where Mesoamerican cities were often separated by rugged terrain, communication was a constant challenge. A highly reflective obsidian mirror, when caught by the sun, could function as a brilliant heliograph, flashing coded signals over vast distances. A swift series of flashes could relay messages between hilltop temples, coordinating everything from market days to military maneuvers with a speed and efficiency that runners could never match. This would have been a strategic advantage of immense importance for managing a complex empire. This incredible dual identity, as both a portal to the gods and a sophisticated signaling device, perfectly encapsulates the Mesoamerican worldview. There was no contradiction in using the same object to receive a divine message and to send a very earthly one. The priest who gazed into the mirror's depths seeking a vision from the god Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, was also a scholar and a statesman, a keeper of calendars and a coordinator of community affairs. The mirror's spiritual power was amplified by its practical utility. Its ability to harness the physical property of light only reinforced its status as a conduit for supernatural forces. The knowledge of how to create and use these precise optical tools was too valuable to be lost, so it was preserved within the sacred context of ritual, passed down through generations under the protective cloak of divine mystery. The pre-Columbian mirror, therefore, stands as a shimmering testament to a culture that saw the universe as an interconnected whole. It reminds us that the line between the spiritual and the scientific is a modern invention, and that the most powerful tools are often those that serve both the heavens and the earth, reflecting the full spectrum of human ingenuity. What emerges from this global tour of ingenuity is not just a collection of fascinating stories, but a profound and universal pattern in human development. Across continents and centuries, separated by vast oceans and language barriers, culture after culture arrived at the same brilliant solution to a common set of challenges. They chose to weave their most advanced technological knowledge into the very fabric of their spiritual lives, creating objects that served two masters with flawless elegance. This was not a coincidence. It was a strategic and deeply intelligent approach to preserving and protecting knowledge in a precarious world. Think about the immense vulnerability of specialized information. In an era before widespread literacy or digital storage, a single war, a natural disaster, or the death of a master craftsman could erase generations of accumulated wisdom in an instant. But rituals and sacred objects are resilient. They are repeated, they are venerated, and they are passed down with meticulous care. By encoding the precise gear ratios of an orrery into a temple offering, or embedding a standard unit of measurement into a prayer tablet, these societies created the most robust backup system imaginable. The knowledge became too sacred to lose and too integral to the community's identity to be forgotten. It was a form of intellectual insurance, guaranteeing that the star charts, the architectural principles, and the medical procedures essential for survival would endure long after the individual who discovered them was gone. This strategy also provided a powerful shield against persecution or misunderstanding. A revolutionary astronomical device could be seen as a threat by a ruling authority, but a sacred object used to honor the gods was often above reproach. The Norse navigator using his sunstone was not a threat. He was a pious man seeking the favor of the deities. The Byzantine treasurer weighing gold with a reliquary scale was not a banker. He was a devout servant of the church ensuring the purity of an offering. This cultural camouflage allowed innovation to flourish in environments that might have otherwise suppressed it. It granted the scholar, the engineer, and the healer a protected space to experiment and explore, all under the accepted and respected guise of religious practice. This reveals a sophisticated understanding of social dynamics, showing that these cultures were not just technologically advanced but also politically and socially astute, navigating the complexities of their time with remarkable cleverness. Furthermore, this fusion points to a holistic worldview that our modern perspective has largely lost. We comfortably separate science and religion into different boxes, seeing them as opposing or unrelated forces. But for the vast sweep of human history, this division did not exist. The movement of the planets was a divine dance, the precise angle of a joint in a temple was a prayer in wood. To understand the world through measurement was to get closer to the mind of the Creator. This integrated perspective meant that every act of discovery was also an act of devotion. The Maya priest tracking Venus was not doing science instead of religion. He was doing science as his religion. This unity of purpose is perhaps the most powerful common thread, reminding us that the human drive to understand our universe is a single, magnificent impulse that can express itself through both prayer and precision. Ultimately, this recurring pattern forces a complete reevaluation of what we mean by advanced. We often measure ancient societies by their monuments or their military conquests, using a scale that values obvious power. But the true marker of a sophisticated civilization may be its ability to integrate knowledge into the core of its cultural identity, to build systems that ensure survival on multiple levels simultaneously. These 26 tools are not anomalies, they are clues. They are invitations to look at every ancient artifact, every worn statue, every faded manuscript with a new set of questions. What if that strange pattern isn't just decoration? What if that ceremonial object has a hidden seam or a precise weight? The next great discovery about our past might not come from a lost city, but from re-examining an object that has been sitting in a museum case for 100 years, quietly waiting for us to finally see it for what it truly is. A perfect fusion of heaven and earth, faith and function, waiting to reveal its secrets. Reflecting on these 26 forgotten ritual tools reveals a profound truth about our shared human journey. Ancient civilizations were not primitive cultures stumbling in the dark, waiting for modernity to grant them intelligence. They were, in fact, masters of innovation operating within a completely different framework, one where the sacred and the scientific were not opposing forces, but two sides of the same coin. Each object we have explored, from the Egyptian merkhet guiding souls and stars to the Byzantine reliquary weighing both faith and gold, challenges a modern arrogance that often views the past through a narrow lens of superstition. We are forced to abandon the simplistic idea that a ceremonial knife could only be for sacrifice, or that a prayer wheel could only be for meditation. These discoveries demand we look beyond the surface to appreciate the breathtaking depth of human ingenuity that found expression in a unified worldview. This journey through history's hidden workshops and temples does more than just rewrite museum labels. It offers a powerful inspiration for our own fragmented present. In an age where knowledge is often siloed into separate disciplines, where science and spirituality are frequently seen as incompatible, these ancient innovators present a compelling alternative. They teach us that the most profound advancements often occur at the intersections, in the fertile ground where different ways of knowing converge. The Maya priest astronomer who saw a Venus cycle in a flint and a divine message was not confused, he was holistic. The Viking navigator who used a crystal to find the sun and honor the gods was not splitting his focus, he was unifying his experience of the world. Their approach suggests that our own modern challenges, from climate change to social division, might benefit from a more integrated perspective, one that values empirical data alongside ethical wisdom and practical skill alongside spiritual meaning. As we continue to uncover these hidden histories, with each new technological advancement allowing us to peer closer at the microscopic wear patterns on an artifact or digitally reconstruct a broken mechanism, we gain more than just a richer understanding of the past. We recover lost pieces of our own story, revealing a legacy of creativity and resilience that transcends time and culture. This process of rediscovery is a continuous invitation, an invitation to look at the world around us with more curious and generous eyes, to question our own assumptions about the objects and rituals we take for granted, and to consider how we might weave together the diverse forms of knowledge available to us today. Thank you for joining this extraordinary journey of rediscovery. If these stories of hidden ingenuity have shifted your perspective, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And for more explorations into the greatest mysteries of our past, be sure to subscribe.